asking, we will be in Deuteronomy 19, so go ahead and open up your Bibles. Those of you that take notes, you can get your notebooks out and your pens. It's going to be a little bit harder today as far as the note takers because there's nothing on the screen. I was going to try and hook up my iPad to the TV through the USB, and then I got here and realized I didn't have an adapter to go to my iPad and all this other stuff. Whatever. So you'll just have to listen in real closely if you're a note taker, and I will do my best to make it all clear. As you know, many of you know, I always have main divisions in my chapters. And so this is broken up into a few different main divisions. So let me say these slowly. Again, we're in Deuteronomy 19. And what we have is beginning at verse 1. 1 to verse 13. Verses 1 to 13. Verses 1 to 13. I called cities of refuge. Cities of refuge. I don't know why I get thirstier recording the video than I do when I'm here live. I don't know, weird. Verses 1 to 13. Cities of refuge. Then, beginning at verse 14, actually just verse 14, I titled Landmarks. 14, and obviously we'll get through that real quick, that section, landmarks. Then, verses 15 down to verse 21, I titled Law of Witness. Verses 15 to 21, Law of Witness. So if you just took notes and you're writing that down, you got to know this is killing me. Because there's no, what's the word, when all the words start with the same letter, I can't remember what it's called, but I've got cities of refuge, landmarks, and then law of witnesses, and that one C. I mean, I was just straining, trying to find a word that started with L, and I took the L. You guys know what I'm talking about. I couldn't come up with something else. So it's cities of refuge, verses 1 to 13, landmarks, verse 14, and then the third main division is 15 to 21, and that is law of witnesses. All right, and we'll work our way through this like we always do, but let's go ahead and start with some prayer. Should we do that? Father, thank you so much for today. And Lord, I am praying for all of these beautiful students that are in class today. And Lord, I miss them, and I'm praying that they would have just a good day, first of all. But then I'm also praying that you would bless our study time together, that they would be able to learn, even from this screen, watching a screen, which is not ideal, but I pray that they would be able to learn, that they would gain and gather wisdom from your word. So as we open it up, we pray that you would bless it. Thank you so much, Lord. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, let's get into the first section, which is cities of refuge. And we've heard, again, Deuteronomy, we've heard a lot of these things before. We actually will get something a little bit new today, but we've heard all of these things before. We've heard about cities of refuge, and it explains for us what it is. Let's look at it. Verse 1. When the Lord your God has cut off the nations whose land the Lord your God is giving you, and you dispossess them, and dwell in their cities and in their houses. So he's saying, when you come into the new land, the promised land, okay? When you get there, and when all the nations that are currently in there, when they're all cut off. So we understand these are instructions for when they get into the promised land. Verse 2. At that point, you shall separate 3 cities for yourself in the midst of your land. It means throughout your land. When it says in the midst, not necessarily in the middle, but just throughout the land. 3 cities, which the Lord your God is giving you to possess. He's going to give you all of those cities, okay? So you're going to take some of this, 3 of these cities that now belong to you because the Lord gave them to you. You are going to take those cities and you're going to do something with them. What are you going to do with them? Well, verse 3, you shall prepare roads for yourself. That means roads to and from these cities. And divide into 3 parts the territory of your land. So you can have one part with one of these cities, another part with one of these cities, and a third part with one of these cities. You're going to divide up the land. Divide into three parts the territory of your land, which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, that any manslayer may flee there. Okay? Now, the word manslayer, as you can probably gather, okay, this doesn't take a lot of study, but manslayer means a man killer, somebody that's killed a man, somebody that's killed a person. Okay? So these cities of refuge, we know, are three cities that will be in three different parts of the country, of the land. And if somebody kills somebody, they are to flee or run away to one of these cities. Okay? Now, at first glance, that sounds like, wait a minute, God's allowing people to just kill other people and he's giving them a way out. Well, he's absolutely not doing that. Okay? Let's see what he's doing. Here's where we get our first subpoint. So if you've written down, your note taker, and you've written down cities of refuge, under that, from verses 4 to 10, okay, so within that, under that heading, cities of refuge, verses 4 to 10, I titled accidental killing. Accidental killing. Let's read it, verse 4. And this is the case of the manslayer, the person who's killed somebody, who flees there, that he may live. So he's running away there so that he can stay alive. Whoever kills his neighbor unintentionally, there it is, key word being unintentionally. He'll actually give an example, but it's any intentional killing. He says, whoever kills his neighbor unintentionally, not having hated him in time past. Okay, so this is not somebody that hated a person and then he accidentally killed him. Okay, that's not the scenario. These are two friends, two companions, two people. We'll look at this example. As when, he says, let me give you an example in verse 5. As when a man goes to the woods with his neighbor to cut timber. So he's going out there to cut some firewood. And his hand swings a stroke with the axe to cut down the tree. And the head of the axe, the steel part, the sharp part, he says the head slips from the handle and strikes his neighbor so that he dies. So, say my friend and I, we go out to the woods, let's go cut some firewood. Okay, let's go together. And I start to swing my axe, and as I swing my axe, unbeknownst to me, accidental, unintentional, the head, the steel part, the sharp part, flies off and strikes my friend, hits my friend in the head. And it literally kills him. Accidental, unintentional. He says at the end of verse 5, he, in this case, in our scenario, the story that I'm telling, that would be me. So I accidentally killed my friend. He shall flee to one of these cities and live. What I need to do is I need to hightail it as fast as I can to one of these cities of refuge, whichever one I'm closest to, whichever one is in my part of the country. I need to flee there as fast as I can so that with the purpose of staying alive. Now, why would I need to flee there to stay alive? Because this individual may have a family member that wants to take vengeance. I mean, that's a normal, natural part. That's, people want to take vengeance for their lost loved ones. And so he says, if it's accidental, you get yourself to that city of refuge, and so that way you can stay alive. Okay, so what we know about these cities of refuge are that it's not just anybody can come into these cities of refuge. So you can't hire some, assassin, Assassin's Creed, to go into the city and look for this person that accidentally killed your loved one and kill him, because nobody's allowed in other than people that are fleeing from this kind of a situation. Now, verse 6, he tells us why they need to flee. Lest the avenger of blood, while his anger is hot, pursue the manslayer, the accidental manslayer, and overtake him. Because the way is long, and kill him, though he was not deserving of death, though the person was not deserving of death, since he had not hated the victim in time past. So he's saying that if I accidentally kill somebody, I need to, as fast as I can, get to one of these cities of refuge, because if I do not, then the family member of the person that I accidentally killed could catch up to me, overtake me, and kill me. When I really, in reality, I didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't on purpose. What you need to know is that this entire chapter has to do with justice. The J word, man, that's the buzzword today. Since 2020, we've seen this huge rise in justice warriors, man, especially on the internet, keyboard warriors. And so this has to do with justice. And he's saying that, it's if I accidentally kill somebody and it wasn't on purpose, I need to get to the one of the cities of refuge as fast as possible because he might have a loved one that comes and kills me, and that would be unjust. That wouldn't be fair because I didn't do it on purpose. So God is establishing that justice system. Pretty cool. Verse 7, therefore I command you, saying, you shall separate 3 cities for yourself. Now, if the Lord your God enlarges your territory, as he swore to your fathers, and gives you the land which he promised to give to your fathers. So if God really does push those borders and the land gets bigger. And in verse 9, and if you keep all these commandments, see, it's conditional. He's not just going to make the country bigger. They have to be obedient. Verse 9, and if you keep all these commandments and do them, which I command you today, to love the Lord your God and to walk always in his ways, then you shall add 3 more cities for yourself besides these 3. So if you're obedient, he's saying, if you're obedient and God expands your land, then you need to make sure that you add 3 more cities of refuge. So this was obviously a big deal to God. He wanted to make sure that justice was established. He wanted to make sure that justice was served. And he wanted to make sure that justice was protected. And so he sets up these rules, these laws concerning justice, and gives these to Moses. And again, they've heard these before, but they're hearing them again. Verse 10, lest innocent blood be shed in the midst of your land, which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, and thus guilt of bloodshed be upon you. So he's saying, we do not want to promote murder, so we're going to set up these cities of refuge. Okay. Now, verses 11, 12, and 13, we're still under that heading of cities of refuge. Okay. And we looked at unintentional or accidental killing in verses 4 through 10. In verses 11, 12, and 13, here's the next subpoint, and that is premeditated murder. Premeditated murder. Okay? Verse 11 says, but if anyone hates his neighbor, lies in wait for him. In other words, he's sneaking, he's lying in wait, he's waiting to take advantage of his neighbor, to kill his neighbor. Lies in wait for him, rises against him, and strikes him mortally. In other words, he kills him and he dies. And he flees to one of these cities. So let's say that here's the scenario now. This is a premeditated murder situation. And let's say now that friend that I went out to the woods with, let's use me again as an example. I went out to the woods with my friend, but man, I had a plan because I don't like that neighbor. Okay, because he, whatever it is, So I go out to the wilderness, to the forest with him to go cut wood, but I'm planning to murder him. I murder him. What he says in verse 11, and he flees to one of these cities. So I actually could murder him, and I could flee to one of these cities. I could actually go to one of the cities of refuge, even though it was premeditated murder. Now, some of you right now are thinking, nah, Jack, that don't sound right. Well, I'm glad you think that because it's not right. He'll go on to explain. Verse 12. Then the elders of his city, so the murderer, whatever city he came from, then the elders of his city shall send and bring him from that city of refuge, and deliver him over to the hand of the avenger of blood that he may die. We'll go on to read verse 13 in just a minute. But here's what he's saying, that if I murder somebody, if it's murder, not accidental killing, murder, I flee to the city of refuge. After I leave, and I'm protected there in the city of refuge. After I leave, it is discovered that I killed my neighbor on purpose. Then the elders or leaders of my city, they can go to the city of refuge, or maybe send the law, send the police or whatever. But what they do is they find out which city of refuge I went to. They go to that city of refuge, and they talk to the leaders of the city of refuge, and they explain the situation. The leaders of the city of refuge will take me and hand me over. They'll say, hey, you killed a man on purpose. You need to go face the consequences. What then happens is the leaders from my city take me back, because I committed murder. They take me back, and they actually hand me over to, what did it say in verse 9? In verse 12, that deliver him over to the hand of the avenger of blood, that he may die. So they're going to hand me over to the avenger of blood. And that just, man, that sounds like the avenger of blood. What is that? Is that like from a superhero movie? Is that like a good guy? Is that a villain? Like, what is that? The avenger of blood, man. It sounds pretty gruesome. Sounds pretty radical. That term, avenger of blood, is actually a reference to the family member that is avenging his family member's death. So they would take me and give me back, or give me to the family member that is going to kill me, that is going to take vengeance for his dead loved one that I murdered. So the city of refuge, it was a temporary, for the murderer, it was a temporary sanctuary. But once it was found out that I had murdered someone, then my time was up, and it was time to go back and face the consequences. I imagine that some people probably got away with murder. I imagine some probably did. Snuck away or whatever. But this is what God set up, because he wants to make sure that, again, justice is served. It says in verse 13, your eye shall not pity him. Talking about the murderer. Do not pity him. But you shall put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel, that it may go well with you. What is he saying there? This is so interesting. These are the things that we miss if we're just reading through real fast. Verse 13. But you shall put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel, that it may go well with you. In other words, the innocent blood, the individual who was murdered, who was innocent and got murdered, he's saying he needs to be avenged. God was actually saying through Moses, obviously, these are Moses sharing these things, but these are not things that he just made up on his own. But he's saying that the individual who was murdered needs to be avenged. And because that's how justice would be met. I could have covered a couple of chapters. I could have breezed through here. But I thought that it was extremely important, because I am talking to a classroom full of high school students, that a classroom full of high school students that hear about justice all the time. And it's important to understand that justice is not something that originated with the world. Justice is not something that people in 2020 made up. It wasn't something that some organization made up. BLM didn't make that up. Justice is something that originated in the heart of God. As you start at Genesis and you read through the Bible, you will come to realize that, God is interested in justice. He wants things to be fair. And so we see that here. He wants the innocent person to be avenged. This is what is called, I want to say corporal punishment, but that's not really the term that I'm looking for. But basically punishment. I'm sure one of the leaders in there, they may have yelled it out by now. but I can't hear them, so I don't remember what the word is right now. But basically, this is justice. This is punishment. And despite what you may have heard, punishment is a good thing. In this case, the innocent party is avenged. The guilt is put away. It's done. It's over with. Once the murderer is put to death, then the individual has been avenged. And but here's the other thing, is that it sets a precedence for everybody else in the land. Do not murder people, because if you do, this is going to happen to you. And so punishment is a deterrent, and it's a good deterrent. We'll talk some more about that, because inside, I know on the outside, man, I look cool as a cucumber. But on the inside, I'm going crazy, thinking about California law. So we'll talk some more about that as we get down to the bottom. But let's look at verse 14, which is our next main division. Okay, so verses 1 to 13 was cities of refuge. Within that, we had accidental killing and premeditated murder, and how those cities of refuge were used. Now, verse 14, standalone, verse 14, is I titled Landmarks. And we'll move through it quickly, obviously, and go into our next section. But verse 14, you shall not remove your neighbor's landmark, which the men of old have set, in your inheritance, which you will inherit in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. So Moses is looking forward into the future when in the future, probably a generation or two later, and I'll tell you why I think that. Because he's looking into the future and he's saying, listen, the land divisions, the borders, they need to stay wherever they're at. God is going to partition it all out. He's going to direct the leaders. The land will be divided fairly, according to the size of the tribe and all those kinds of things. What God is saying, or Moses is saying, but obviously, again, we know that God is giving these instructions to Moses. He's saying, don't change the landmarks. Don't change the borders. Wherever they're at, wherever they've been set, when the men of old, those would be the individuals that first went into the promised land, that are going to go in with Joshua and set up those boundaries. Boy, my eye is just itching. They're going to set up those boundaries. They're going to get their boundaries from God, first of all, and the leaders. But they're going to set up those boundaries. Don't move them. It was extremely important for God, the heart of God, the mind of God, that justice was met even in the land distribution, that everybody got their fair allotment according to the size of the tribe. And so it was important that even in the future, that those lines not be pushed one way or the other, and that that everything was just or fair for future generations even. I love this. He's not saying, hey, listen, future generations, figure it out yourselves, or have a war and figure it out. He's trying to prevent that. And so he's giving them instructions for the future. I love that. God has a future and a plan for us. And if we will follow his instructions, it will be met with success. I didn't say our lives would be easy or perfect. That's not what I'm saying. But we will, if we follow God's instructions, we will experience success in God's heart, in God's mind, in God's eyes. I'm not saying if you do what God says, you're going to win the lotto, man, $80 billion, because that could very much be out of the will of God. That could be a very bad thing. It'd be a bad thing for me. But what I mean is success in God's eyes, in God's mind, in the heart of God. You can, you'd be pleasing to the Lord for the future. And he can provide for you if you follow his instructions. And for us, it means not necessarily following the Old Testament Mosaic law, but just following God's will, following God's plan. Man, what does God want for me? This is the will of God, and doing what the will is, what his will is. So here he gives them landmarks. Let's move on to our third and final main division. And that is verses 15 to 21, which is the law of witnesses. Law of witnesses. Law of witnesses, verses 15 to 21 for the note takers. Verse 15. Okay, so we have law of witnesses. Verse 15 is our first subpoint under that heading. Under law of witnesses, verse 15 I titled, more than one witness required. More than one witness required. Let's look at it, verse 15. One witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or any sin that he commits. So any kind of violation. You can't have just one witness against one person. Okay? He says, by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, the matter shall be established. Okay? That portion of the verse is used in the New Testament, but by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, the matter shall be established. This is a wonderful, those of you that have been around for our study through Deuteronomy and even the prior studies, you know that a lot of times the laws don't apply directly to us. But what I've told you week after week is that we're learning valuable biblical principles. And this is a biblical principle, that one witness is not enough. There needs to be 2 or 3 that were eyewitnesses or heard exactly what the person said. Some of you, I'm not looking at anybody in particular, some of you may have come across, encountered times in here in the high school ministry where, something was going on. Here's the truth. We've got a room, a group full of high school students. There's going to be drama sometimes, right? Yes, there's going to be drama. And if I'm dealing with it, you may have heard me say this. Okay, I may have asked this. Did you see what he or she did? Or did you hear what he or she did? Because it's important that we not just level an accusation against somebody without some kind of basis, some kind of proof. And that's what God is establishing. Again, justice. He wants things to be fair. And I can't just go, hey, listen, I saw Matt steal a picture off of our wall in here. And then everybody accused, oh, yeah, that's right, Matt, man, he's a thief. That's not good. I cannot, as just one single person, bring that accusation against Matt. There would need to be 2 or 3 witnesses, and so that's established. That's a good biblical principle. We still use that to this day. I will still, if there's some situation that comes up, some kind of problem that arises among our group, and there's going to be problems because we're people, and there will be problems. But if a problem arises, you can know that I'm going to ask, well, did you see the individual? Now, you may feel, if you're the one doing the accusing, you may feel like, well, Pastor Chris, you don't believe me, you don't trust me. But let me ask you a question. If somebody came to me and was accusing you of something, would you want me to just accept that one person's accusation? Or would you want me to question and say, wait a minute, I need 2 or 3 people, and did you see it, and did you hear it, and did you were you there? You would want me to investigate a little bit, to question. And so that's a good not a biblical principle, a biblical principle, not a biblical principle, a biblical principle. More water. Okay, let's finish this up. Verses 16 to 21. Still under that same main heading, law of witnesses. Verse 15, more than one witness required. Now, in verses 16 down to 21, to finish us off, we deal with witnesses, but false witnesses. What if there's false witnesses? What if What if more than one person comes? What if there's 2, 3, 4 people? But what if they're false witnesses? Then what? Let's find out. Verse 16. If a false witness rises against any man to testify against him of wrongdoing, then both men in the controversy shall stand before the Lord. Yikes. Can you imagine if you are bringing a false accusation against someone and then you find out you have to stand before the Lord? You might go, JK, just kidding. Like, no, I wasn't really accusing him. I was just kidding. See what that does? It's a deterrent. If I know that it's my word against his, and I'm trying to, wrongly convict someone, but I know that because there's just 2 of us, we're going to have to go before the Lord. It's like, never mind. It's not that big a deal. But if I'm telling the truth, then okay, let's go before the Lord. But in this case, we're dealing with false witnesses. So he says, listen, verse 17, you bring, then both men in the controversy shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges. So everybody gathers, and the judges who serve in those days. So you would have the priests, you would have judges, and they all would come and gather before the Lord, probably before the Lord at the tabernacle or at the temple. Verse 18. And the judges shall make careful inquiry. That's great. Careful inquiry. And indeed, if the witness is a false witness, here we go, who has testified falsely against his brother. When he says brother, he could mean your brother, but just your fellow Israelite in this case. But for us, our fellow Christians. Verse 19, then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. So you shall put away the evil from among you. What happened? What he's saying is, if I falsely accuse Matt of stealing something, what would happen is Matt would go, no way, man, I didn't do that. And we couldn't figure it out with the judges, or the judge or the judges. Then the judges are going to say, okay, since it's one witness, his word against yours, we got to take it before the Lord. And I say, fine, and even though I know it's a false accusation, fine, let's go, because I really am, trying to convict Matt. And we go before the Lord, the judges, the priests. And then it's discovered through a careful inquiry that I'm a false witness. And really, I was just out to get Matt because his worship videos get more likes than mine on YouTube. But, I'm not bitter about that, okay? I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter. And so I'm accusing, and they find out that I'm a false witness. Then what happens is, verse 19, then you shall do to him, I would be the false witness, you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. So whatever he was playing, if I convicted Matt, if I got him convicted for stealing a picture off the wall, and I was going to say, yeah, man, he needs to be flogged, or it's death sentence for him, and then they find out that I'm a false witness, then whatever I was going to do to him is done to me. So you see, it's a deterrent. It's justice for Matt. It's a deterrent for me, the liar. And so God is setting up this justice. Now, we've got 2 more verses, verses 20 and 21, and they're important verses. Verse 20, and those who remain shall hear and fear. There it is. There's the deterrent part. And those who remain shall hear and fear. Hold on to verse 20. You know what just popped into my mind? Capital punishment. That's the phrase I was looking for earlier when I was thinking, like, what is the word? What is the word? Word. It's capital punishment. Okay. So you got to remind me in a moment because I need to remember that. But how are you going to remind me if this is, and you're on, anyways, capital punishment. Verse 20, and those who remain shall hear and fear. It's a deterrent. And hereafter they shall not again commit such evil among you. In other words, it's going to stop those people from being false witnesses. See how that works? And in verse 21, you've heard it before. Your eye shall not pity. Life shall be for life. In other words, if I took somebody's life, then there's capital punishment, then my life needs to be taken. Eye for an eye. If I somehow plucked out some guy's eye because I was mad and he lost his eye, then I need to lose one of my eyes. Tooth for tooth. If I got in a fight with somebody and I punched him and knocked his tooth out, they're going to hold me down and punch my tooth out. Hand for hand. If I damaged someone's hand or I cut off someone's hand, then my hand is to be lost. They're going to do the same thing to my hand. Foot for foot, same thing. Now, here's what I need you to do. Turn to Matthew chapter 5 so that we can finish up. Matthew chapter 5, verse 38 is where we're going to start at. So I'll give you a minute to get to Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. I'm going to get some more water. How about that? Okay. I know it's kind of funky, but you guys are busy. You're not paying attention. You guys are busy turning to Matthew chapter 5. That's right. I'm teaching in shorts, man. Shameful. Also, that water's going to be out when you get here on Sunday, but there's another new one. Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 through 42. Matthew chapter 5, 38 through 42. This is what Jesus says. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. So he just quoted from Deuteronomy. But in verse 39, I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also, so that he can slap that. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, your coat, let him have your cloak also. Anybody wants to take your clothes, give him the rest of your clothes. Whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. So if a Roman, in those days, if a Roman guard soldier grabs one of you Jews and tells you, hey, because the Romans could actually do this. They could compel the Jews to carry their gear for 1 mile. It was actually law. Fact check that, okay? If somebody does that, you tell that Roman guard, yeah, I'm going to go with you 2 miles, okay? And verse 42, give to him who asks you. If somebody asks you for something, give it to him. And from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. Let him borrow it. Go ahead. Work with, live with open hands, man. My stuff is yours. But that opening verse, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth. But I tell you, this has confused people for a long, long time. And what's confused people is that in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy chapter 19, we just read eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, foot for foot, hand for hand. We read those words. And we understand what God's doing. God is establishing a justice system for his people in Israel. And then we come to this, and it sounds like Jesus is saying, hey, you've heard it said eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, verse 39, but I tell you. In other words, it sounds like he's going, yeah, but scratch that, man. That don't mean nothing. We don't pay attention to that anymore. But that is absolutely untrue. Let me explain to you what's going on here. In Deuteronomy chapter 19, Deuteronomy, it's law. Okay? It's one of the books of the law. It's the Mosaic law, the law of Moses. Call it the law of Moses. It's really the law of God, but it's the law of Moses because it was given to Moses. However, in Matthew chapter 5, why does it sound like Jesus is saying, forget that old stuff? He's not. He's absolutely not saying that. Let me tell you what he is doing. He is talking to people. He's in the Sermon on the Mount. What's the Sermon on the Mount? The Sermon on the Mount is the Master's Manifesto. It is Jesus talking to the people that have gathered, the thousands that have gathered. And they're wondering, like, who is this new rabbi? What is he all about? And he's telling them, this is himself, Jesus, this is what I'm all about. And Somebody's about to walk in right now. I don't know if it's Tegan or if it's Irvin. It's one of those guys, but they're about to get really embarrassed. They're coming in to clean, I think. But what's going to happen is that what Jesus is doing is he's talking to, it was Irvin, you guys. He came in, he snuck in, but he's just snuck out. What Jesus was doing was he was talking to individuals. I mean, he's talking to a large group, but he's talking to individuals. These are instructions for the individual who wants to know what God's kingdom is like. What is it like in God's kingdom? What's it like to be a follower of Christ? So Jesus he's acknowledging this Old Testament law, eye for an eye and tooth for tooth, capital punishment. That's what that is. But you must understand that in Deuteronomy chapter 19, that was set up for a society. It was set up as a foundation for a good, law-abiding society. When Jesus is talking in Matthew chapter 5, he's not canceling that law out. What he's saying is for the individual, and specifically for the individual who wants to follow me, Jesus saying, whoever wants to follow Jesus, you got to be willing to give up your rights. You got to be willing to take a slap in the cheek and turn the other one and say, go ahead. Finish it off. I had a Christian friend who used to say, I'll turn the other cheek. It just might be yours. Jesus is talking to his people and saying, or to the potential people, and saying, if you want to live this life, this Christian life, you want to be a follower of Christ, a disciple, then you are going to have to forego your rights. Somebody strikes you in the cheek, turn to him the other one. Somebody, he says, do not resist an evil person. In other words, don't fight with an evil person. Verse 40, if they want to sue you and take your stuff, give it to them. If somebody says, no, you're going to go with me for a mile, I'll go with you too. Verse 42, if somebody asked to borrow something, give it to them. It's yours. Hey, can I have a bite of that pizza? Nah, you can have the slice of pizza. Go ahead. That is those are the mannerisms of the master. That's what Jesus does. He came here, Philippians chapter 2, he came here and he gave up his rights, humbled himself, and was obedient even to death. And not just any death, but even to the death of the cross. Man, the most shameful way to die, Jesus did it. He didn't have to do that, but he set an example, gave up his rights for us. And he's saying, if you want to follow me, you got to do the same thing. So that's why there seems to be a difference there. But I wanted you to understand, you young people, because you're the next voters. You all are the next leaders, and hopefully there will be some people come out of here that go into politics. We need some Christian people in politics. And maybe there'll be some lawmakers, some lawyers, some judges. And I want you to understand that God is concerned with justice, and that capital punishment is a biblical principle, and that it was in the heart of God. Because capital punishment is a good thing, and I'll tell you why it's a good thing. It's a good thing because that means vengeance for the individual that was hurt or harmed or killed. And it means that capital punishment is a deterrent to other people. Now, here in the state of California, beautiful state of California, and I've traveled up and down throughout the state of California. I've not been from one border to the next. I've been to the southern border, but not completely to the northern border. I've gotten close, but not all the way there. It's a beautiful state. That's the truth. And I know we hear all kinds of bad things, and lots of our Christian friends move to the promised land, Texas, which is having its own issues because there's too many Californians there. Too many Californians move there. But it's a beautiful state. But in our state, we have lowered the standards. Politicians have lowered the standards again and again and again and again. And so you all see the videos. People going to the Nike store, grabbing handfuls of things, arms full, and they're running out, and nobody's doing anything because the the dollar amount has to be over a certain amount in order for any kind of serious crime to be committed. It's foolishness. And you know why they did that? You know why they raised the amount that needs to be stolen, the amount of merchandise that needs to be stolen? The reason they did that, this is so dumb, is to help with overcrowding in the jails. They figured, well, if we raise the amount of money to charge someone with a felony, if we allow them to take up to $900 of merchandise, then they won't go to jail and we won't have overcrowding. I'm serious. Fact check it. See why they do it. And they keep lowering the bar. They just keep lowering the bar. And the state is trying to put restrictions on the police, and it's crazy. And they don't like our state government does not like capital punishment. It's biblical. It's a biblical principle. And you all need to understand that, and understand that this is something that God put into place. It was not Moses. It's the Mosaic law, but it came from God. And I want you to all understand what justice is. If one of my family members gets killed unjustly, unfairly, and then the individual that did it is just let off the hook, there's no justice. That's not justice. That's not fair. And so, do you want to be a justice warrior? Because I think you can be in a godly way. I think that you can be a good godly justice warrior by understanding what justice is, by having a good biblical perspective, a good biblical worldview, and then doing your best to put those principles into practice. And I think that there can be an improvement, even in this beautiful state of ours with all of its issues and problems. I hope that you guys have been blessed today. We're going to close in prayer in just a minute, but